This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Disarming Disability.
Hi, I'm Nicole Kelly, and I'm a speaker and an activist.
And hi, I'm Sarah Tuberty. I'm an occupational therapy student, a flight attendant, and an aerial artist.
We both live with a disability. We both were born with a congenital limb difference and are hosts of a new podcast, Disarming Disability, coming to you on Public House Media.
So come, learn, explore, and understand disability so we can deconstruct these social stigmas and really build a more inclusive society.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or at publichousemedia.org. Come hang out with us every Wednesday. Also follow us on Twitter at DisarmDisable, Instagram and Facebook at Disarming Disability, and check out our website at disarmingdisability.com.
Bye!
Welcome to another edition of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Brice, we're going to do a little Bundesliga today, talk some Gold Cup qualifying, and catch up on U.S. and the Mexican male teams. So, awesome.
Yeah, it's a busy show, so we'll get straight into it. Let's talk about that Bundesliga. We'll get the club out of the way first. Bundesliga is a tight setup still. It has had a number of interesting matchups so far. It's also had a number of close races in the standings right now. I mean, your typical teams up top, Bayern Munich, Dortmund, RB Leipzig, Mönchengladbach is still your top four. But when you look at it, this is a tight race because you've got Bayern Munich and Dortmund up there tied for first right now. With Bayern getting the edge with a goal differential, and total wins. But this has been a really interesting season so far in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, I think we talked about this when they were on their winter break, how Bayern Munich started off kind of slow and Dortmund ran out to this lead, and now all of a sudden, ever since the winter break, Bayern Munich hasn't lost in the league yet, and Dortmund's dropped, I believe, 8 points with 2 draws and a loss, and that sets it up all for their match in a couple of weeks. That could probably determine the race for the title, and you kind of see Bayern Munich catch little by little. They've just kind of crawled their way back into the title race and have given themselves a chance to win it. And I don't know, yeah, if you're Dortmund, you're kind of like you're clawing on to this title that when the season started, you looked so well, and you looked like you were doing so well, and all of a sudden, the big boys are right behind you, and they've now taken pretty much the lead for this title race. So, the 9 games left. It'll be interesting to see, especially with that matchup in a couple of weeks, what happens between those two on the top of the table.
Once you get past those two, you get into a very close race between RB Leipzig, Mönchengladbach, Eintracht. Is all there within one game. Bayer and Wolfsburg, I guess, are within striking distance, but it would take a decent amount with the way that the schedule shakes down with the remaining games for them to be considered a serious threat at this point to jump up in that matchup there to try to take third, because they are 7 points behind at this point, both Bayer and Wolfsburg. But, I mean, I got a chance to watch Mönchengladbach play their last 2 games, and they've looked exceptionally sloppy. Eintracht has not had, when you look up highlight reels, Eintracht has been barely like a minute long. They really haven't had anything special, even just putting goals in the back of the net. This has been a very lackluster team the last couple of weeks that have been just grinding out draws. They've really kind of dropped their goal production that they had earlier in the season. And that's kind of just left Leipzig just there. Like you feel like they shouldn't be the third best team in Bundesliga right now, but yet they are, and it kind of creates like this interesting setup for some of the smaller professional inter-country leagues.
Yeah, I think you made a good point with Lipsip because they haven't been impressive either. They've kind of been scrapping away 1-0 wins and things like that. Since February, they've only scored more than once in one game against Stuttgart. Besides that, they're not creating a lot of chances. They're not scoring a lot of goals. Luckily their defense has been very tight and very solid, where they're getting a lot of shutouts, but they're beating bad teams by the smallest of margins, and that's not giving themselves a good. They're not earning that third spot. It's more falling into their place right now. So it'll be interesting to see how this little 3-team race to get that last Champions League spot kind of works itself out, because none of them are really grabbing it by the horns and taking advantage of the opportunity they have here to try to get that Champions League spot.
Looking down further in the table, decent race for eighth between Werder and Hoffenheim. When you look down at the bottom of the table in towards the relegation race, you're looking at Stuttgart, Hanover, and Nuremberg, all with very few points. I think that Hanover and Nuremberg are going to be the two that get sent down, but Schalke is also down there at the bottom of the table too. Only 23 points on the season, with a record of 6-5-15 and a negative 17 goal differential. It surprises me to see Schalke down that low.
Yeah, it's definitely probably the biggest disappointment of the Bundesliga. Has been shocked. I mean, like you said, only 23 points. This is a team that was in the knockout stage of the Champions League, but in the Bundesliga they've struggled, and this has not been a very good Bundesliga when it comes to quality too. When you see their results outside of in Europe competition, how they do compared to everybody else, for them to be so far down is very disappointing, I think, if you're a supporter for them. And they've already gone through a couple of coaching changes too, and they just have not been able to kind of figure it out so far this season. But biggest disappointment by far has to be Shakhtar this season.
To end this part of the segment on a positive note, have there been any teams that have kind of surprised you with how good that they've been in the Bundesliga this year?
I think Wolfsburg. I like Wolfsburg. I always find these teams to be pretty even, and it's always surprising to see which ones kind of step up or take that extra step. Bayern Leverkusen, I thought, has done pretty well, and so has Frankfurt too. Frankfurt's sitting 5th right now, and they've been probably the ones I have been surprised with the most. I just follow them a little more too, just because they had 2 Mexicans on the team that left during the winter transfer season. But for them to be 5th, I think it's been pretty surprising. In a positive note for me. How about you?
SC Freiburg hasn't been too bad. I mean, they've been able to rectify problems that they've had on the pitch by grinding out draws late. They've got a less than impressive record, but at 7-10-9, they're -5 goal differential. They're right in the middle of the pack, with the ability to move forward still later in this season, especially with how really inconsistent Hoffenheim and Hertha have been in front of them. There's a chance that they may be able to kind of scrap up a little bit further. I think they're in a solid spot that, given the circumstances that they've been placed into and some of the circumstances that they put themselves into, I think that there's a lot of moral victories for this team. And so, given the circumstances, I don't mind giving a little bit of a shout out to Freiburg.
All right, there you go, Freiburg fans.
All right, let's continue here on Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. The international window is here, and that means that the last of the Gold Cup qualifiers for the 2019 Nations League qualifying will be done at this point. A number of teams, the top 10 teams, move along, and really only 6 of those look to be safe. Curacao, Haiti, Canada, Cuba, Jamaica, and Martinique. Also, Haiti and Cuba will play each other in this next set of international games. So that's going to be an amazing game. Both of those teams sitting safely up the top. But when you get to records and what actually sets these teams apart, Bermuda, Guyana, St. Kitts and Nevis, and the Dominican Republic currently sit in those last 4 spots. Nicaragua, Belize, El Salvador, some names that we would recognize and expect to be a little bit higher per se, are sitting there with the 2-1 record, but outside of the qualification spots based on goal differential. It's definitely creating an interesting situation heading into this final round to see who's going to move up into League A, who's going to qualify for the Gold Cup, who's going to be put into League B and League C, which is similar to how they do things in Europe or any other federation that's got a lot of teams moving forward. There are a couple of teams that also can't move any higher than what they are. St. Lucia, for example, Suriname, a lot of countries that are territories that play as an individual location, like the U.S. Virgin Islands, for example. But U.S. Virgin Islands is like 0-3 at this point, so like not them. But even teams like the Bahamas, like that you would expect to have a little bit of higher presence, have not done too well in this tournament. And it's really kind of created a nice opportunity to see teams that have a lot of hope to them, like a Canada, like a Haiti, like a Jamaica, popping up in this League A of the Gold Cup qualifying to really do well.
Yeah, I think the most surprising for me has been Curacao right now. They won all 3 of their games. They sit on top of the position 1. Jamaica, Canada, you kind of expect when you look at the rest of the teams for them to do their jobs, and they have, which is nice. They haven't gotten tripped up by any bad teams or teams that you would assume that they should beat. So I think those are positive notes for them, that they're getting the job done of what's getting asked for them. I think those are the kind of takeaways I've had. And like Curacao and Haiti, how well they've done. Cuba too, all those guys getting those 9 points, and that's been impressive to me. Those are the kind of the ones I've noticed for when you look at the way this unique system has gone, because it's the first time doing it, and I think there's been a lot of trial and error, but those kind of been the takeaways for me in those regarding those teams.
You talk about first times for everything. You talk about reclassification and the opportunities that it creates. It does actually create a lot of drama when you think about it in terms of how extensive a giant table like this is and just how far away a win, a loss, and a draw is from 2 wins and a loss. And,
yeah.
And it does and there are a number of teams. I would look at Nicaragua very, very heavily in this case, where Nicaragua that does not have a top goal scorer over the top or anybody that can feed the ball that far or that consistently in the attacking third, that they get penalized a little bit in terms of some of these teams that are able to go out and drop 12 on, Barbados or something like that, and they're only able to drop 6 because that's not the type of team that they are.
Yeah, and I think it just shows like how the margin of error is so thin when in these situations too, because of something like that, where if you're not blowing out a team that everybody else is blowing out, now all of a sudden that win is a win, but it almost feels like less of a win compared to somebody else blowing out somebody 12-0, like you mentioned. And yeah, it just leaves you so little room to mess up, where you need to win the games you're supposed to, and if you have to blow them out, you really need to blow them out, because goal differential all of a sudden now becomes a big deal, or a draw to a tie, a draw to a win now becomes a bigger deal too, just because there's less wiggle room in those things. So I think one of the countries I've been a little disappointed with is El Salvador. I kind of expect a little more from them. So to see them sitting where they are, kind of really dead center in this huge pack, I just thought they'd kind of be one of those teams in a little higher up the table for me too, when we talk about small margins of error here.
Well, I mean, they're sitting at 2-0-1 right now, 2-1. But the thing is, they're only a +3 goal differential. A team with the same record in Bermuda, they lead that pack. They have a +11 goal differential, and the way that these teams are playing each other is not really helping, because when you look at who they play next, El Salvador is going to Jamaica to play. I mean, El Salvador kind of blew their shot. When you look at this, this match day 4 matchups, and you look at some of the matchups that are there, Suriname versus St. Kitts and Nevis is going to be a big one because St. Kitts and Nevis has had a history of blowing things in the last game in previous groups and tournaments in the past. You have... Dominican Republic and Bermuda are both sitting at 2-1 as well. They're both sitting in that almost relegation zone, that the 7th to 10th spot, where only one of them is most likely going to move on. And it would benefit Bermuda if they tied. Again, we talked a little bit about the Haiti-Cuba matchup, but French Guiana has the opportunity to upset Canada a little bit. And I think the other big one that a lot of people didn't necessarily think was going to be a big one would be Guyana. And Guyana, and I have to find it here, Guyana goes to Belize. That's another matchup of a team like Belize that's sitting in 13th with the same record, but only has a +4 goal differential, goes up against a team that also has 2-1. Even though that these teams are so far apart on the table, these matchups are still quality, entertaining, and so important for these teams to actually play meaningful games at this time. It creates a really great opportunity for these teams to grow heading into their last opportunity to get ready before the Gold Cup if they so make it. These matchups are going to be on March 21st to 24th. It'll be interesting to see how they come along, but that will wrap it up for this segment. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the teams that went beyond the Hex and didn't have to be in this tournament in the United States men's national team and the Mexican national team here on Your Soccer Passport.
This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, where we talk about sports from the fans' perspective. A new show comes out every Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
And welcome back to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. If you are interested in supporting our show or any of the other shows on Public House Media, the best way to do that is by visiting the merchandise shop on tpublic.com. The best way to get your t-shirts, mugs, wall art, and more, all available in the TeePublic shop. That's visit tpublic.com/pubhousemedia, teepublic.com. All right, with the international break, we talked a little bit about what the rest of CONCACAF is looking at with the Gold Cup qualifying and the league stage and everything else. But for teams that made the Hex in World Cup qualifying in the past, they don't have to deal with that. That means that the United States men's national team, as well as Mexico and a number of other great teams from CONCACAF, did not have to play that. They are on friendlies. Let's start off with the Mexican national team. Mexico will play today.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, there you go. I figured you would like that to talk about them. But they play against the common opponent first, and I think that's kind of a big deal. They play against Chile first Friday, the 22nd. They'll also play Paraguay next week. While the United States, they'll play Ecuador on Thursday and then Chile next Tuesday. So when talking about this Mexican national team, they're going up at a squad in Chile who I don't want to say Chile's been down the last couple of years, but Chile may not be the threat that they are, but they're such a good team. They're such a well-rounded team. For Mexico, though, what's their kind of game plan heading into this matchup?
I think it'll be interesting. I think this is the first time that you'll have Tata coaching the team, the full squad. I kind of want to see how he balances his starting. How does starting lineup look, especially when you have players in good form like Raúl Jiménez has he now earned that starting spot over someone like Chicharito Hernandez, who's been there for a while, and now do you give Jimenez that starting role? And that's kind of what I'd be interested to see in this first in the first game and the second game, is how the transition of the player kind of from what the spine was for the last couple of years to now this new spine and how he decides to line them up. I think it'll be a 4-3-3. I expect the team to be very aggressive and very, look to score a lot of goals. Just use players like Chucky Lozano and use younger players like Diego Lainez, and kind of try to be in the forefront of an attacking style of play, but more importantly, in the players they pick, who does he pick and why, and is it a transitional stage, or does he stick with kind of the base of the last couple of years? That's kind of what I look for in these friendlies for Mexico.
The thing is that you're getting quality opponents, and when you have a manager that comes in like this, you're not necessarily looking for the win. I mean, as much as you would like to have the win, as much as there's pride involved and stuff like that, this is the first time that they have an opportunity to really put a team forward. And you're absolutely right. You're talking mostly and primarily about what your goals are and what your focus will be in the future. And for the Mexican media, we know that is going to be dissected 18 ways to Sunday, and that there will be no right answers. But at the same time, when you're talking about youth development, you're talking about the ability to take your stars that may be in a struggling situation and not performing the way that they need to be, whether they're not performing at a club level or at a national level. This shakeup is a big opportunity for Mexico to really kind of tap into the potential that we all think that they should have. And, I don't want to say that I'm excited about it, because it's interesting. And, as the U.S.-Mexican rivalry is there, I don't want to see Mexico too good. But at the same time, Mexico has more talent than what they've really kind of been able to get out lately. And I'm hoping that with Tata Martinez coming around, this will be a chance to kind of break things along. But I think ultimately those decisions are coming from like a front office perspective and not here, and that battle is going to be interesting to maintain through this time.
Yeah, and I think and luckily they will be playing quality opponent. Chile, like you said, a little disappointing. They didn't make the World Cup last year. They're kind of now they're also in a transition stage where they're moving away from that core base of players like an Alexis Sanchez and Vidal, and kind of now their focus is into Copa America this year. And where are they in a frame of mind after missing out on the World Cup too? So it'll be an important opponent, because I think this will be a very hungry Chile team, and I think you're going to see that both when they play U.S. and Mexico. But for me as a Mexican supporter, I'm interested to see how Tata picks the team, and if it's kind of, because it is a friendly after all as well, but is he doing it with the mentality of this will be my Gold Cup starting 11 in the finals, or is this am I trying something new here with these players? So I think that's going to be very interesting, just because there's also not a lot of time to work with these guys before their first major tournament and their first big test this summer too. So that's another thing to keep an eye on, I think, when you look at the Mexico game and these games coming up for them.
And that's something that you can see with both teams that maybe transition a little bit, is that with new managers and with ultimately a tournament that has been primarily just for the United States and Mexico over their time, it is something that other teams are going to be paying attention to as well. I mean, the Costa Ricas of the world are definitely paying attention to what's going on here. The Panamas of the world are definitely paying attention to what's going on here. Because if it is a situation where these teams are playing the long game, then how seriously will they be approaching their games in the Gold Cup? And we've talked about it with the United States women's national team. We've talked about it with the Spanish national team. When you have these other games, how important are these games building up to a tournament like that compared to the expectations of play once you get to that tournament. And what you're talking about has a real long-term goal, and you're trying to figure out how long-term the goals are. I think it's an interesting storyline, even though that it may not be the sexiest storyline. It is something that will have a direct impact moving forward for both the United States and the Mexican national teams.
Yeah, and I think one of the, I think an example, I think on top of my head of where we mean these long-term goals to these short-term goals is somebody like Hector Moreno, who's been a defender for the national team now for 10 years. He's 31 years old now. If you talk about a long-term goal, which I think is for all these teams making the World Cup and the World Cup, he probably won't be around in 4 years, 3.5 years to start in a World Cup game. But is he at this moment right now possibly one of the best defenders from Mexico who can help you win the Gold Cup this year? Possibly, but, so is Carlos Salcedo. So there's, I think that's an example of what I'm trying to get to, where you do have these long-term goals and you have these projects, but you also do have a responsibility and a goal to win now. And because of the tournament coming up, and how do you find that balance? And it'll be interesting to see with this, especially with this Mexican national team, because you have those guys like Moreno, like Hernandez, who have been there, who've been the spine for the team for years now. And are they going to start being kind of phased out? And if they are, how quickly does it happen, and how much, and which ones get phased out quicker than the other ones too, I think will be something to keep an eye on.
There's some situations there at the same time with the U.S. men's national team. Just to continue further into that, you have some interesting spots with the friendlies there about who's going to be involved and who will not be involved. Zach Steffen's out with a knee injury, so Jesse Gonzalez comes in. You've got some really interesting lineup decisions by Greg Berhalter in what to kind of set these teams up with for really their only time left before the Gold Cup. I mean, even though that some of the other teams will have some extra play, the United States men's national team really does not have a lot going into this Gold Cup besides these two games against Ecuador and Chile. And so for me, when I look at this U.S. men's national team, I look at a roster that is smaller, is younger, but even some of the more traditional names like a Tim Weah, is not going to get a lot of time or repetition in these matchups. It's just not something that I expected, because when you get this close, I expected there to be a little bit more of that push for a Gold Cup, because the United States has so much more to prove. But I mean, Greg Berhalter's taken a real interesting methodological approach to this whole managerial situation, and for as long as it took to hire him, it definitely is a fitting approach, if you wish, to him being a part of this managerial decision-making process. For a guy like Berhalter and his team right now in the U.S. men's national team, how similar of a situation is this between what the Mexican national team has been dealing with compared to the United States national team?
I think just right off the bat, I think it seems a little more. It seems more different. This team is a little younger than the Mexican national team. You have a lot of younger players too, getting not their first chance, but getting more opportunities than they would in the past. So I think from that regard, the project does seem a little longer term, and I think that. I mean, and I think part of it has to do too that because the U.S. didn't qualify for the World Cup, you had this long period of where there was no competitive games all of 2018. So they're allowed to it was easier to phase out players who would have been in a World Cup team last year and who might have played now. But for them, it's easier to phase out because they didn't have anything to play for last year. So you're allowed to get these younger guys in. And I think for that kind of gives Berhalter a little longer wiggle room and a little longer grace period as well, as he tries to figure out how he wants his base to be, and from there kind of move on from this summer to next year and go from there. I'd be interested. I just really want to see like what his center back bearing is going to be, because I think that's where the U.S. probably has the most weakness. Would probably be the center back. If John Brooks is a starter, who plays next to him? But those are the kind of things I want to look for in the U.S. national team. But I thought they played pretty well a couple months ago in his first couple friendlies against not the best quality Costa Rica, not the best quality Panama. But what I saw from those teams are some guys who understood what they wanted from Greg Berhalter and his style of play, and the transition from defense to attack in the different formations when they were defending to when they were attacking. So I want to see this national team with now his European players. Can they do something similar with that? I think those are the kind of things I want to look for.
Wrapping up this week's show, let's hear a shout out.
My shout out is going to be corn dogs. Saturday is National Corn Dog Day, so enjoy your corn dogs on Sunday or on Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah, it's National Corn Dog. My basketball coach started it. I swear. You can look this up. Brady Sano, Corvallis, started National Corn Dog Day. Swear to God. So, yeah, enjoy corn dogs on Saturday.
You know, the problem with podcasts is that you can't see the look of disbelief in my face. But, okay, to corn dogs.
They have vegan corn dogs now, too. They have, yeah.
You poor
if you don't,
people. Okay.
I'm just... I mean, I'm not going to have vegan corn dogs, but I'm just saying to all our vegan listeners, there's a chance for you to enjoy corn dogs too on the national holiday.
Okay. All right. Corn dogs. Corn dogs, Jackie. Corn dogs. Even better because I'm from Michigan, and so I get to make those references. All right. Until next time, I'm Brice Burge, Ivan Sanchez Carrasco as well. You can find us on Twitter at @BriceBurge and at Ivan Sanchez C90. Until next time, have a good one.